In the opening sequence to the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Mary's in a supermarket hurrying through the aisles. She pauses at the meat case, picks up a steak, and checks the price. Then she rolls her eyes, shrugs, and tosses it in the cart. That's kind of how I felt. Sure, I would have liked for things to have been different, but roll of the eyes, what can you do? Shrug. I threw the meat in my cart and moved on. And thus concludes Running It with Scissors by Augustin Guys, again, this is 13 weeks in a row now, and you guys just won't stop showing up. I guess we gotta do this. Game face. Welcome, everyone, to the Tonto's Demise Week 13 recap. In case you can't already tell, a little bit under the weather. Gonna try to keep this one within reason. Actually, the only problem is my voice. Sore throat every morning for the past week. When I wake up, hack up a couple nice big chunks of mucus, phlegm, or whatever what it is, and then feel good for the rest of the day. Other than when I go to talk, and I can't do that very well. Thursday, the other day, I actually couldn't really talk much at all. Past couple of days, gotten my voice back a little bit. Wasn't sure what I was going to do for the recap if my voice didn't come back, so you have to forgive me because that's probably going to happen several times here throughout the recap with, like I said, just basically a sore throat. No COVID issues, fortunately. But yeah. So, what happened here in week 13? Just concluded not too long ago, the Monday night game, Bills and Patriots. We had one matchup that could have, I guess it did come down to Monday night, could have come down to Monday night, but nature had other plans, as there was very poor conditions in Buffalo. Wind, snow, rain, whatever was going on. Mostly wind, and very few passes thrown in that game, which was unfortunate for Yinzer Jags, having Josh Allen in that game, needing about a 50-pointer from him. Even in good conditions, that might have been tough to ask against a Patriots defense that's been playing very well in the past few weeks here. So, were there any huge injuries this week? Thielen went down for Possum Magic pretty early. That's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. Real important as of right now. Keenan Allen went on the COVID list today, but Ed Lager, that's not going to make a difference here for you going forward, because with the events here of Week 13, and thanks to Shawshank Athletics defeating Yinzer Jags, unfortunately, Saquon ain't so, and Ed Lager going down in defeat, you were eliminated with those defeats anyway, but thanks to Shawshank getting that victory, Dub C Hooligans, despite getting a victory this week, you are officially eliminated. So all of the playoff teams are currently decided here, still with 1 week left to go, because Dub C, even if Shawshank were to win, or to lose, I should say, next week and end up 7-7, and you were to win next week, which would take you up to 7-7, Shawshank is just way too far ahead of you in points. There's no possible way you can catch up to him. So unfortunately, Saquon, it ain't so. Ed Lager and the Dub C Hooligans, we clap you out. It's been an interesting and exciting year for you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry that it still had said 1 week left to go, and the playoff picture is definitely set. Always more interesting. I mean, the top 4 teams have basically been set for about the past 6 or 7 weeks. I think I couldn't tell you couldn't tell you when it started to shape out, but it's definitely been at least a good, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago that I can remember saying that I think these are going to be the top 4 teams. That's the way it's playing out, and we're going to be fighting for those last 2 playoff spots, and that's pretty much how things have panned out. Excuse me. And now the only thing that's, well, week 14 will not be completely pointless or uninteresting, because there is going to be the potential for all sorts of shakeups in the playoff standings here in terms of seeding, who's going to make the bye weeks. That's up in the air at this point too, because Yinzer Jags lost this week. Actually, Yinzer Jags, even though he has 9, he's still he's guaranteed a bye week. I'm fairly certain at this point, because Disco and Biscuits play each other next week. So even though Biscuits is at also 9-4 at this point, and Disco is going to be 8-5, so Yinzer Jags, well, even if you lose next week again and end up 9-5, unless Disco can make a big jump in the points there, because you guys are fairly even this week, and Yinzer Jags is about 30 points ahead of you in overall total points. So that if Disco can win next week and knock off Biscuits, that could still, depending on the point totals, I think the bye weeks, and I'm just getting into unnecessary pre-review speculation here. Usually should save this for last, but I'm fairly certain Yinzer Jags is going to make one of the bye weeks, and it's just a matter of will the other one be Biscuits or Disco, because with this loss, Possum Magic this week, he's going to drop to 8-5. Topes will be 8-5. Yeah, I don't think that the point. A lot of ins, a lot of outs, as the dude would say here. So we'll see. Why don't we stop? Oh. All right. Before we get into the review, we might as well address some things going on here. First of all, I guess Disco are still upset about this transaction thing. I know people sometimes don't believe me, or don't think it's like, take it as things personal that are not personal. Absolutely not. I stand by everything I said before, that you went through the whole process of making a transaction, picking up that player. The situation is completely different than Kevin's, where, he just put a bid on a guy. Later that evening, the guy popped up on the COVID list, unbeknownst to him. So those situations are not the same. You know it. I know it. So in that case, willing to grant him the clemency there. I was not happy about it at first. Honestly, when I saw that Kevin had picked up Alan Lazard, even though he was now on the COVID list, I'll be perfectly honest, my first thought was, haha, you dumb fuck. Why did you do that? Um, but I understand. Then it's like, well, he probably didn't know that. Sorry. Forgive me for the illness, grossness here. That So Kevin didn't know that the COVID thing came up, because that is what happened. It was later, like in the evening of that day. I remember noticing that, and wondering if somebody was still going to put a bid in on him. That ended up being what happened there. So yeah, Disco, like thinking about it too, like if that was me having done that and picked up the wrong player, my reaction would have been, you picked up the wrong player. You just wasted a transaction. You dumb fuck. Well, what do we do now? We just pick up whoever we want. So that's my opinion. It's just like, you made your bed, lie in it. It's one transaction out of 20. Especially since you were a team knowing that you were probably going to make the playoffs. You're still sitting at 17. Magic has been sitting at 19, knowing he's going to make the playoffs for like 2 weeks now. Haven't heard a peep from him about having a problem with the transactions, or you just you work within the confines of the rules, and that's just what maybe we should have upped the transaction total, but we didn't, like you said, and that's just my opinion. Is that you said you made the mistake, just accept you made the mistake and move on, deal with it, live with it, and it's not stopping you from doing anything. Yeah, you still got 3 transactions left. You kind of been holding off on doing anything, but there isn't really much for you to be doing anyway. Our waiver wire is extremely thin to begin with, which leads me into like the whole this making trades thing. First off, let me preface this by saying, all these trades going on, I'm not angry about it. I'm not trying to overturn anything. It's just, again, working within the parameters of the rules that we've made. With Brian basically selling off a bunch of his current pieces for future pieces. That's just the nature of the beast when we are doing the keepers. Brian's been accumulating potential players for next year. I still don't think that, I should say, I still strongly believe that you are overestimating the potential next year for these guys who are coming off of serious knee and Achilles injuries. Akers, Etienne, and Dobbins. Let me look at Saquon this year. Still probably doesn't seem like he's right, so there's no guarantees there. I just don't think that those guys are going to... you'll end up getting something maybe for them. But personally, just because of this year, where those guys were drafted so late, maybe there's some value there. People are going to think that there's some value there. That's probably what's going to end up happening. But just still personally... I would be very skeptical of those guys until I see something next year. So coming back from serious injuries like that. So the Madison for Sutton trade, basically not a big deal. That's, I'm assuming you did that. Detling did that to get Madison right now, who's a temporary fix. Probably for Cook, who's going to be coming back, they say, during the fantasy playoffs here. So you basically traded, and the thing is, I don't want to say you traded nothing, but you traded, and again with Disco and Waller, you traded nothing that hurts you now. Um, yeah, you can say that you traded something that's going to hurt you later in terms of keepers, but again, I think I've said this before too. I don't care about next year. As long as we're in this season, I only care about this season, playing for this season, playing to win, and doing whatever I can. And I think that's understand. I understand that's what you guys are doing too. But you're also, we've had in the past people complain about teams at the top trading with teams at the bottom. So I should say the Madison Sutton trade, whatever, the Metcalf Mike Williams trade, not a big deal for me, both of those. But I'm not trying to change anything or get upset about anything. But I mean, we as other members of the league, where we are all trying to do our best in a competition to win. And again, this is nothing. I think sometimes people take things personally for when it's not intended to be personal. This is all fantasy football. Tonto's Demise. When we are on the fantasy football field, we are all in competition and enemies, but that does not affect anything other than fantasy football. Anything personal is not meant to be like that. It's not the intention ever, at least from my perspective. But the whole thing with my issue with Waller is, Disco, you did not give up anything, in my opinion. Yeah, you won't be able to keep Darren Waller next year. But 1 year, big deal. He can be a difference making tight end, but I really think the season that Kelsey had last year was like a once in a decade type, once in a career type season for a tight end. Him, said Kelsey, Kittle, Waller. Those are like, excuse me, again, like the top tier tight ends. But I think people's ideas of what they could do got overinflated by Kelsey last year. My opinion, I mean, Waller, we saw what Kittle did this past week too. Yeah, those couple guys, Kelsey, Waller, and Kittle, I don't really think any other tight ends are capable of blowing up like that. But again, they don't do it every week or all that often. Maybe once or twice a year anymore. Other than those big blow up weeks, the tight end pool is deeper than I think people thought it was at the beginning of the year. Said, look at Gronk sat on waivers for a while. Why I didn't pick him up? I said I don't know. Probably should have. Things like that. Just for example, like there's a whole bunch of examples of tight ends that got serviceable tight ends getting picked up off of waivers and stuff this year. Yeah, those guys can be difference makers, but I think that idea is more I want to say realistic, but like the idea of them is bigger than what they actually do on a week to week basis. So for me, looking at this is, from my perspective, looking at this is, Brian, like, I don't know why I understand. I find it very frustrating as someone who, all of you we are all in competition with each other. And basically, Disco was in a position where Waller is out. He needs to find a replacement for Waller. Where is he going to get it? Is he going to have... And the rest of us say, okay, there's a wound. Disco's got a wound by not having Waller. He's got a weakness. And we're all looking for... we don't wish injuries on other teams and players. It's just part of the game. Um, is it poor sportsmanship to not? I mean, it is beyond our control, really, to say. It seems like you might think that I'm trying to say that I want to play Disco where he's not at full strength, and you might think well, that's poor sportsmanship. You should want to win where your opponent is at their full potential. Well, that's just not the reality of the situation quite often. Often you're not at your own ideal lineup at full strength either. So, at the end of the day, the object is to win. You want to defeat your opponent, and if injuries help pave the way for something like that, that's not, you know, anybody's fault. It's just the nature of part of the game. It's something that happens. But for me, again, okay, Disco, you did not give up anything. You were going to have to search for a tight end to replace Waller for this week. You could have picked up somebody off of waivers, made a trade like you ended up doing. But Brian, you gave him a top 5 draft pick, one of the top running backs in the league, to a team that's already in first place and basically stacked. If you accepted that trade, I mean, if I was Disco, Ertz and Kamara, like, I couldn't be hitting the accept button any faster than I would. It would not have been possible to press the accept button any faster if you had sent me that trade if I were him, because I'm assuming Kamara is able to come back and do what the difference between Waller. He was basically going to have to be going without Waller to begin with. Okay? Is the point I'm trying to make. That he was going to have to do something. And you basically handed him not only his replacement for Waller, but one of the best running backs in the league. I understand that you want Waller. You see your things for yourself out of that trade, and again, we are all trying to win, and it's just part of the most frustrating part of the game to see, again, Disco make a huge gain to his team with that trade, and really, essentially, in my opinion, he gave up nothing. Boo-hoo, you can't keep Waller next year. Maybe you can. You can trade for him if you want. But Waller is not, in my opinion, that significant of a game changer that Kamara can be. Said running backs, such a difficult position. I said you gave him. It's just a very frustrating trade as someone trying to vie for a championship here to see happen. I think we talked about this a little bit with busting Kevin's chops a little bit weeks ago about all of his trades and trading Patrick Mahomes. Your trades have ripple effects across the entire league sometimes. Not just you and the team that you made the trade with is I guess what I'm trying to say. And I don't know if you're just only worried about your gain and not your loss, or what you're getting and not what you're giving the other team. And I'm not saying that I'm not handing. We're not handing the trophy to Disco, thanks to having Alvin Kamara. That's obviously yet to be determined, because anything can happen. what it does is make me more motivated to try and take Disco down if we should meet in the playoffs. Even though it's going to be more difficult. Yeah, I mean, well, I guess finally, thank you, Brian. I should say, out of all of this, thank you for trading Bigler. Again, another trade with Bigler early on. Thank you for giving him the Arizona Cardinals defense and not taking T. Higgins away from me, because I believe that was right before Robert Woods went down, and Higgins is coming on now, and Woods is obviously gone. And my faith in the Miami Dolphins defense is paying off here down the stretch. And if T. Higgins was no longer on my team, I would be in a very difficult situation here moving forward in the last few weeks of the season. So thank you for that, at least. So yeah, I said I wasn't going to try to keep things shorter because of my voice, but just trying to address that stuff and let you know what I think about it. Again, not angry about anything. I said we work within whatever the rules are, and like I think somebody said in the lineup there about upping the transactions or making unlimited transactions or things like that. Trust me, if we had unlimited transactions, you guys would hate me because, again, I work whatever the confines of the rules are. I will work within them, and if transactions are unlimited, I will probably end up making like 75 during the year. If they're meaningless, then I don't care. That I will work within whatever the rules are. I think it's much more interesting with a transaction limit here. You have to put more thoughts into each one. Sometimes you get into a tough spot with injuries and stuff like that, where you have to burn through ones when you don't want to. But again, unluckiness is just the nature of the game as well. We've tried to make it as accommodating as we can for pretty much everyone. Nobody's really been devastated by injuries where they've had to burn through all their transactions. I think, Dub C, you chose to burn through all your transactions. You gave up on your team after week 1, basically. I think almost your entire roster is different than what it was on draft day, for better or worse. That's an argument that can be had at a different time and a different place. But anyway, yeah, again, with Disco wanting his transaction back, I just still think that no, you did what you did. Just accept that you made a mistake and move on. It's not you. It's not that I'm afraid of you or see you as a threat or anything like that. It is a neutral, unbiased decision as best as I can possibly make it. It would have been to say I would have had the same opinion about anybody doing that, and you may not believe me. Maybe it's easier to just get angry and blame me for being, picking and choosing who I make decisions about or whatever. But that is not the case. No matter how many times I say it, you might not believe me, but it is the case. It's not, it's a difficult position to be the one who has to make those decisions, and you try to be as unbiased as possible. But again, I would have made the same decision about anybody who had said I picked up the wrong player. Because then what if somebody says, well, you could very easily have just picked up, you could have been back and forth on somebody. In this example, let's just say you were back and forth on Peoples-Jones, or was it Singletary? Back and forth, and you punched in Peoples-Jones, said, yes, I picked him up, did that, and then we're like, oh, no, I know. You could have immediately changed your mind, which could also be what have happened. That could be anybody in any kind of any other scenario with any other two players. Making the transaction and then immediately being like, oh, no, I don't want. I want this guy, not that guy. Immediately regretting it and saying, if in that case too, I would say, so you hit the accept button, you're the submit button or whatever, for that transaction. You went through the process, you hit the button, take responsibility for what you did. That's my personal opinion on that matter. I hope we don't have to talk about it anymore. And if Disco, you want to be pissed off at me about it, that's fine. But I sit comfortably knowing that I feel like that's the right decision, and I would have made it for whoever made any similar type of claim. And then with the trades again, it's really frustrating to see Brian giving up what you give up Kamara like that. Again, I think what makes me angry about it is that Disco gave up nothing for it, in my opinion. Again, the whole Waller keeper thing, whatever. Is it something? Yes. Is it worth what you gave him? In my opinion, you gave him Kamara for basically nothing, because he was going to have to find a replacement for Waller for the rest of this season. Who knows? Who knows when Waller will be coming back? Yeah, that's why I don't like that. Is that again, Disco got one of the top 5 players in the league for basically, in my opinion, again, nothing. So, but we will see. Again, we're not trades happen all the time. People get angry. People get or whatever. People defend their trades, things like that. Like, I understand what was going on, and we're not gonna crown Disco now, because you gotta prove it. You can't. Doesn't matter. You're right. Are you gonna be the LA Rams of this year, where you're gonna stack your team with all these different players? The names look flashy, but can they put it all together on the field is sometimes a completely different question. The Rams don't seem to be figuring that out quite enough. You got to build a team. You can't just throw pieces together and expect it to work. So that's a half an hour of my opinion on those couple matters there. So hopefully most of that stuff will be behind us, at least going forward here. So we still got lots to talk about after this week. So yeah, let's try to run through these matchups fairly quickly. So week 13, as always, we start with the defending champion. This year it is the Springfield Isotopes once again, going up against Possum Magic. Topes trying to move up and clinch a playoff spot, able to do it this week against Possum Magic. 199.95 to 147.5. For the Topes, Stafford goes for 53, Deontay 30.5, T. Higgins 28.5, Ayuk 8.5, Miles Sanders 20, Ingram 3.5, Dalton Schultz 9.5, Gesicki 11.5, Folk on Monday night 7.5, and then the Miami Dolphins defense, Yahoo says 12. I think we bumped it up to about 24-ish, maybe 27, something like that. Looks like we added about 15, so 27-ish. Just under 200 points this week was enough to get past Possum Magic, who had Carson Wentz this week. Only going for, despite the 31-0 win, he didn't have to do too much this week. Only 28.5 points for him. Thielen, unfortunately, only got 1 point for you and suffered I think they said a high ankle sprain. According to, well, all right, gonna sneeze. Sorry about that. If it is indeed a high ankle sprain, excuse me, they play on Thursday night this week against the Steelers. So that's a tough spot. Possum Magic is going to be in again. Mentioned already before, he's only got one transaction left. The trade deadline has passed, so perhaps putting Possum Magic in a difficult situation. He's already clinched a playoff spot, but he's a little bit thin at the wide receiver position already. High ankle sprains are usually a couple weeks to get back from. So unfortunately, Possum going to be difficult sledding here going forward, seeing what you're able to do in terms of filling that void that's probably going to be there. Unfortunately, at the most important time of the year, Diggs goes for 9, Elijah Moore 20.5, Mixon 9. Excuse me. Mixon 9.5. Trying to go too fast here. What's the Damian Harris from the running back for the Patriots had a 64-yard touchdown run, 1 yard short of getting the bonus there. Gets you 20 points. Gronk goes for 21.5. Devontae Freeman in the flex goes for 20.5 as well. Koo goes for about 4.5, and your Minnesota Vikings defense, I believe Yahoo says 9. They actually ended up losing at the last minute to the Detroit Lions, which cost you a victory points to -3 for there, and they ended up getting that they scored too many points. Yahoo says 9. I believe the actual score ended up being 12. But yeah, so only 28 from your quarterback, 12 from your defense, so 40 there. 20 from Moore, pretty good. Harris did good. I mean, you got several 20s in there, but so the quarterback position, Thielen getting hurt, Koo not doing too much in your defense there. So a decent production from a bunch of your guys, but some other things that didn't quite go too well there for you. Unfortunately, and said the Topes were able to have some good scores from a couple guys, and said just a hair under 200 points this week. So with this victory, the Topes are going to move to 8-5. The Possum Magic is going to drop to 8-5, and I believe that means the Topes will leapfrog Possum Magic in the standings here, move up to 4th, while Possum will drop to 5th. All right, next up, CMC Music Factory, already eliminated from playoff contention, trying to take Saquon It Ain't So down with him. He is able to do it this week as CMC pops off for 198.05 to Saquon It Ain't So's 155.8. Kyler Murray comes back for CMC, gets 43 points. Mike Evans, 17. Deontay Harris, wide receiver for the Saints there. He actually had a long touchdown, so he got you 22.9 instead of 19.9. But now he is suspended for a couple games. Mooney got 7.5. Ty Johnson, 3.5. James Conner, 19. Goddard pops off for 2 touchdowns with Minshew at quarterback. 28.5 points for him. Raymond, the Lions receiver in the flex there, 5.5. Your kicker, Gay from the Rams, goes for about 16. And then the Rams defense, Yahoo says 14, but both defenses had big jumps in points this week. I want to say it was like 20-something. Jumped you all the way into like the mid-30s. Close to 40 points there from the Rams defense. So yeah, it was enough to get, said between Murray, the Rams defense, Goddard, Harris, a couple guys there, Connor, enough to get you just under 200 points there. And unfortunately for Saquon, it ain't so. You had to win out your schedule to have a chance to make the playoffs. And unfortunately, CMC comes out of the shadows and is dragging you down with him. putting an end to your season. Dak goes for 38.5. Emmanuel Sanders 5. Hunter Renfrow 19. Tyler Lockett just under 20. You instead of picking up, you could. I think I'm kind of surprised you didn't pick up Sony Michel. Plug him in there. I guess you were busy or whatever. This is like at least the second week in a row, I think, that you played somebody who was ruled out. So kind of just from a pure competitive standpoint, kind of a disappointing. Some disappointing moves there for Saquon. You want starting guys who you know are going to be out. No one likes to see that. So Henderson got you 0. Bolden 6.5. Pitts 8.8. Christian Kirk in the flex only 1.5. Tucker gets you about 6.5, maybe 7. And then again the Colts defense, they shut out the Texans. Big bump for you here too. Looks like we bumped you. Yahoo says 25, but you gained about 25. You were pretty close to 50, upper 40s there with your Colts defense, but it was not enough. So thanks to those couple low scores, I don't think Sony Michel would have made a difference in here. Just been a disappointing season. Lots of things went wrong for Saquon, so you lost some close matchups. Things could have gone differently. Of course, Derrick Henry going down was a huge blow to you. Foreman, nobody's going to replace those somebody like Henry. Dak has kind of been hit or miss, surprisingly. Excuse me. With his performances this year, and so CMC Music Factory, he's going to move up to 5 and 8, and Saquon at 8, so he's going to fall to 5 and 8. Again, excuse me for that. So yeah, that's it. Sorry, Saquon. Like I said, just a lot of little things that did not fall your way there. Matchups that were real close. Just a lot of bad luck along the way this year. Next up, Disco versus Dub C Hooligans. Dub C Hooligans trying to keep his playoff hopes alive. Needed a couple other things to fall his way. Obviously, he did his job, but Yinzer Jags did not do their job to help him. Disco actually surprisingly gets the victory here over Dub C over Disco, 181.1 to 171.9. For Dub C, Tua goes for 50 points. Is really, I guess, kudos to you, Kevin, for, I know you traded Patrick Mahomes and everything. I don't even know where you got Tua from. But if you were doing your homework or whatever, he has been, his true value is in our league because he is a completion machine. They are dink and dunk offense, which I think way back, I think I said that's why I kind of wanted Gesicki this year, because I see Tua as a short pass offense. Of course, I thought they would run the ball more than they have. But he has been he's a little short completion machine, and those points add up in our league much more than they do in other leagues. Said Bateman and Brown, both Ravens receivers there. Bateman gets 0. Brown goes for 10.5. Patterson goes for 12.5. Montgomery and Jacobs 28 and 24 respectively. Big games for those guys. Bigger games going forward for Jacobs now probably because Kenyon Drake broke his ankle. Unfortunately, it's not going to matter because the trade deadline has passed. Nothing you can do. I guess, if anything, I should say that we are happy that he is on your team and not the Yinzer Jags anymore, because Yinzer Jags are the only team currently I have to worry about. Kelsey goes for 5.5. And the factor here that really swung this one, I was kind of surprised too, just watching a lot of garbage time at the end of that Kansas City Denver game. A lot of passes, little dump off passes, and a touchdown there for Javonte Williams in his first game as a solo act. No Melvin Gordon this week. He pops off for 32.8. Probably the biggest difference maker in this matchup. Suck Up goes for about 5.5. And you started the Atlanta Falcons defense, as we know. They did manage to score a touchdown off a pick six, but those points were pretty much all that they could muster because they gave up too much of basically everything else. Basically all your defensive points came off of that pick six. And you said, fortunately, forgetting that Dallas was playing on Thursday and keeping their defense on the bench did not cost you a win this week, as Disco has Mahomes go for only 28.5, Tyreek only 4.2, Godwin gets 30, Metcalf gets 11, Taylor 27.5, Fournette 22, Ertz only 2, Beckham Jr. 10.8, Prater goes for about 8.5, and then the Arizona Cardinals defense, Yahoo says 18. Gonna say, I think you gained 9, so up to 27 from them. But yeah, all sorts of things that could have gone differently in this matchup. Mahomes had a quiet game. Tyreek had a quiet game. Tough matchup against Denver's defense there. Maybe a little bit tougher than quietly. Denver's defense a little bit better than maybe they don't get the attention that other teams do. But so yeah, that was the big factor here in this matchup. Said Javonte going off and Tua practically doubling up Pat Mahomes there, making the rest of us, I guess, look like fools, and Dub C a genius, I guess. For he said not needing Patrick Mahomes, finding somebody who ended up getting you a victory. But again, unfortunately, Dub C, you needed Shawshank to lose this week to have a chance at making the playoffs, and unfortunately that didn't happen. So the best record, both of you guys, your best record, your potential best record is 7-7. Shawshank's potential worst record is 7-7, and again, he is too far ahead of you in points, which means even with this victory, you are eliminated from the playoffs. Disco is going to drop to 8-5. He will move, I think, from second place down to third place, and we'll be playing Biscuits next week. Could potentially drop even further if Possum Magic or the Taupes, all three of those teams are going to have the same record now, 8-5. So if Disco loses next week, he could actually drop even further down the standings here. So that's going to be a very interesting matchup to watch next week. Ed Logger versus Hillbillies on PCP. Again, much like CMC and Saquon, Hillbillies eliminated trying to take Ed Logger down with him. And Hillbillies on PCP are able to pull it off here at the end on Monday night. You guys were basically even going into Monday night. Hillbillies had Cole Beasley and Stevenson, while Ed had T. Bass, kick his ass, T. Bass, and basically Beasley and Bass canceled each other out. But Stevenson was able to get enough points to push Hillbillies to victory here. 156.4 to 150.35. So Ed Logger, that 8th loss, will be eliminating you, unfortunately, from playoff contention. Sorry. For Hillbillies, Burrow goes for 44.5. Beasley 2. Boyd 13.5. Gage 22. Najee Harris 15.5. Stevenson 7.8. Hawkinson 15. Sutton 3.5. Joseph, Vikings kicker, goes for about 10 or 10.5, 11. And the Steelers defense, Yahoo says 16. We must have gotten you to like 19, I think, from that. But yeah, it ended up being just enough there on Monday night from Stevenson's rushing stats to get you past Ed Lager and eliminate him, said, from playoff contention. Unfortunately for you, Ed. Lamar Jackson, 42. Keenan Allen, 22.5. Brandon Cooks, 8.5. T.Y. Hilton, 4.2. Antonio Gibson, 22. Saquon, 13.5. Fant, 7.3. Gaskin, 7. Bass, 3.5. And the Eagles defense, Yahoo says 11. We must have bumped you up to about 20, I'm going to guess, from the Eagles defense. Some not so good scores, some decent scores in both sides of this matchup. Unfortunately, it said it was basically dead even coming down to it. Maybe if there would have been better weather conditions, the kicking game might have been different here for Buffalo. He did miss a 30-yard field goal, which cost you a point there. So really, if Beasley didn't do too much, maybe that would have been different. If there would have been more passing in this game, but there was very little. So it's just December football. It's going to be something you just have to deal with, unfortunately. As part of picking players from teams that are going to be playing in those weather conditions, unfortunately for Ed Lager, Bass was not able to squeak out a victory and keep your hopes alive. But again, all for naught, because Shawshank got the victory this week here. So even if you had won, it would not have mattered for you either. So Hillbillies, with this victory, he will move to 4-9, and Ed Lager will drop to 5-8. Next, we got Biscuits versus Gags. Biscuits trying to hold on and fight for a bye week, hold position at the top of the standings there. Gags already eliminated, trying to maybe knock him down a peg. Unfortunately, Gags just kind of scraping together a lineup here at this point. A lot of underwhelming names in your starting lineup. Biscuits, he gets the victory, 180.9 to 141.7. Brady goes for 72.5 points. I think apparently the Buccaneers' game plan this week was we're not going to run the ball at all. We're just going to come out and throw. 38 completions for Brady this week, half of his points just off of completions. Devontae Smith, Chase Claypool, CeeDee Lamb, 3.5, 7.5, 19 respectively. Zeke goes for 6.5. Jamal Williams, 9. Kmet, 7. Van Jefferson, 16 in the flex there. Boswell, 8.5 or so. And the Chiefs defense, one of the only long touchdown bonuses this week. Yahoo says 22. I think we must have bumped you up to about, I want to say 9, so 31-ish for over 100 points from Biscuits Buns this week. Over 100 out of his 180. So despite mostly single-digit scores there, he was able to get up to 180. And you might have come close to beating Gags this week with just Tom Brady, CeeDee Lamb, Van Jefferson, and the Chiefs defense. Sorry to say, Gags, just weren't able to work your magic this year. Quarterback for Gags, Heineke goes for 39. Gallup, 14.5. Galladay, 6.5. Mike Williams, 16. James Robinson, 2.5. Breida, 1.8. Conklin at tight end, 12.5. Waddle goes for 18. Butker, about 12. And then the Buffalo Bills defense, I believe, since there was so few yards in this game, even though they lost, Buffalo's defense still got you 18 points. It's enough to get you up to like 140, kind of make this matchup respectable. But unfortunately, Gag's not enough, and Biscuits gets the win. He is going to move up to 9-4. He's going to be tied for first place. I think it will still be in second. Record-wise, with Yinzer Jags now, and Gags to Riches, he will drop to 4-9. Take a look here to see who's going to be in the basement now. So Justin won, Gags lost. Looks like Brian is still going to be in the basement, but not by too much. Well, actually, Gags was like 100 points ahead of you, Brian. So, yeah, Brian, Hillbillies on PCP might be stuck in the basement unless he can win next week and Gags loses. It's going to be probably one of those two guys ending up in the basement with the Rivers jersey next year. All right, then the big matchup here of the week was Shawshank versus Yinzer Jags. Shawshank needed to get this win to basically knock everybody else out of playoff contention and put himself in, and he was able to do that against Yinzer Jags, who was trying to break away from the pack and get win number 10 and be a game ahead of everybody else with 1 week left to go. Probably would have essentially clinched you a bye week already, which I think you might have already done, as I got to, I guess, a little bit earlier. But Shawshank this week gets the victory. He goes, the only team that goes over 200, 202.95 to Yinzer Jags 173.25. For Shawshank, Herbert goes for 56.5. Chase, Cup, Pittman 10, 27, and 17. Edwards, Allaire 11.5. Mike Davis 17 points out of nowhere. Had to start him because Dalvin Cook was out, and Mike Davis jumps in and gets you 17 points. Andrews only 9, but Justin Jefferson went off for 38.5 points this week. Carlson, your kicker, got you about 12, and the Saints defense, I believe Yahoo said 7, but I think you got a little mixed up when you were adding up your scores there. We had to actually cut 3 points from your score because Saints defense actually only got 4, but Carlson's field goal fractional points got you like half of those back, and you ended up losing like 1.3 or something like that. But yeah, Herbert going off, Cup his 27, almost 40 from Jefferson, enough to get you past the Yinzer Jags this week, who had his hope was for Josh Allen and Jacoby Myers. Needed about 55, 57, maybe 58. I want to say 58-ish from those two guys combined. Unfortunately, as we all know, Josh Allen's capable of delivering that just by himself. But unfortunately, again, the conditions tonight were not pass friendly. He didn't do too much. Excuse me. And Josh Allen only got you 28, and Myers actually got you 0 because I think Mac Jones only had like 2 completions for the entire game. McLaurin 5, Hopkins 11, Myers 0, Eckler 17.5, Mattison 21.5. Again, Kittle popped off for 42.5 points this week. Unfortunately, all for naught, as you did not get the victory. But you need those points here as we head into the final week of the season in terms of where our playoff seeding is going to be at next week. Pollard, he goes for 15.5. Zerline, your kicker, goes for about 12. And the Tampa Bay defense, Yahoo says 14. Must have been about 20, I'm going to say, based off of the difference there. But yeah, said you got bunches. The injured Jags, not much you could have. I mean, just the pure unlucky circumstances this week. The conditions there in Buffalo made that game difficult for everyone going. Allen didn't do too much. Patriots defense, tough to go up against. Both defenses in this one, tough to go up against in normal conditions. So it was probably hard to expect that Allen was going to deliver all the points that you needed, but unfortunately. Sorry. Myers couldn't do anything for you. So yeah, the injured Jays is going to drop to 9-4. Still going to be in first place. But Shawshank Athletics are going to move to 7-6. He's going to be currently in 6th place, but he, with this victory, knocked Saquon, Dub C, and, well, Saquon and Ed Logger knocked themselves out, but Dub C, you needed Shawshank to lose, and that did not happen this week. So, the teams that are going to be in the playoffs are set. Yinzer Jags, Disco, Biscuits, Possum, the Topes, and the Athletics. So, like I said a little bit before, basically week 14 is going to be a big potential for a lot of shuffling there for the seedings. The Topes are going up against CMC. Going to be trying to get win number 9. Could potentially stay ahead. If Disco loses if the Topes can win next week and Disco loses, that could move the Topes all the way up to number 3 and knock Disco down to maybe 5. Depending on what Possum Magic does, or even if Shawshank plays Gags, so he might end up 8-6. He's heavily favored in that matchup. So yeah, if Disco, you lose next week here in this last week, you could end up Possum plays Dub C. So if Possum, the Topes, and Shawshank all win, and Disco loses, Disco, you could actually drop all the way down to, I think, as far as the number 6 seed there. So that's going to be, you could either make a bye week, or you could drop to the 6th seed. It's going to be Biscuits and Disco again going up against each other. That's going to be really the biggest matchup for the league in general to watch. So Possum versus Disco. Possum versus Dub C. Possum needs to get that win. It's all going to come down to playoff seeding, and I think where you're going to be. It's really not going to be known. Ed versus Yinzer Jags. Not saying Ed's going to be a pushover in that matchup, but that's looking pretty good for Yinzer Jags. Against Shawshank versus Gags, looking good for Shawshank there. Hillbillies versus Saquon. Basically a matchup of Hillbillies trying to avoid last place there. So, yeah, a lot of things could go on here. So people could drop, people could move up. And I was thinking about this quite a bit in terms of like what happens if Josh wins or Josh had lost tonight. I think if Josh had lost, that would have made he would have basically clinched his 6th seed. It would have locked him in to the 6th seed, which would have meant that Josh would probably have to play, so whoever ends up in the 3 seed would have to play Josh next week or in the first round of the playoffs. This is if Josh had lost tonight, which he didn't. So I started to think to myself, if Josh loses and he is locked into the 6th seed, do I want to try to what do I want to do next week? Is it worth Do I want to try to move up to the 3 seed and end up having to play Shawshank in the first round of the playoffs? Or do I want to try and stay one of the 4 or 5 seeds? And no offense to Possum Magic, but I would much rather play you in the first round of the playoffs than I would Shawshank Athletics. Just telling it like it is. But I mean, all those things with Yinzer Jags losing, Disco losing, Possum Magic, the Topes are going to jump ahead of you, and Shawshank winning. I said Shawshank should win this week against Gags. Yinzer Jags should win this week against Ed Lager. Possum and Dub C, that's actually going to be a pretty good matchup. Possum is in a tough spot with the loss of Thielen there. Not sure what he's going to do. It's the Topes versus CMC. Not saying that one's a pushover for the Topes there, but probably should win that matchup. So yeah, there could basically be a lot of shuffling here, and like I said, where do you want to end up in the standings? I think they said the best that I could do right now would be 3. That's if Disco loses to Biscuits, and everybody else. It's going to be tough for Possum. Again, tough. That's going to be an interesting one to see what happens there. If Possum loses, he could drop down even further. Well, he's going to be in the 5 seed right now. He could drop to 6. Or it said all those things play out. Disco could drop to 6. Which means if Shawshank wins, he's probably going to let's see. I was trying to think if how far. I don't know. Well, it's gonna be trying to figure out, put all the pieces that adjust here together in my mind to figure out where these people could end up in the standings. Again, if it said Shawshank could make a big jump from if he wins next week, and a couple of other teams lose. Conceivably, Josh could jump all the way from 6 to 3. So yeah, Disco could fall all the way to 6, possibly. Possum could drop down. Shawshank could make a big jump if a lot of things fall his way. So it's gonna come. It's still up in the air, really, on who's gonna make what teams are gonna get those 2 bye weeks. I think Yinzer Jag's probably gonna get one. Will it be Disco or Biscuits getting the other one? And who's gonna be the 3 seed versus, because the first round of the playoffs obviously will be 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. So it's going to be interesting to see how next week plays out for us. Maybe not so much for the people that are eliminated, but for all of us in the playoffs here now, to see how the standings shake out and what it leads to in terms of the matchups for week 1 of the playoffs here coming up in week 15. All right, everyone. I think that's about it. Sorry for all the coughing and the scratchy voice here, trying to get through this. Again, hopefully, kind of just got all that stuff out before about the trannies and the trades and stuff like that. Again, and I can't emphasize this enough, this is all purely on the competition of the fantasy football field. If any of you take it as like personal criticism or personal attacks, no, 1,000 times, no. That is not how I ever intend. That's not the meaning behind anything. In all of this, it's the competition it's purely in the spirit of competition for Tonto's demise and nothing else. In terms of playing to win, which is what I do. I play to win, and you're all my opponents in this. And personally, I think that's the attitude all of you should have. I don't think everybody has that attitude exactly, but still, for the most part, but still, this is the best league in terms of that I've ever been a part of, in terms of the competition and the camaraderie and all of the other things that come around with it. Everybody's really good, and it makes the league really. It's a difficult challenge every single year. Let's see. Even as with the keepers and stuff, people's keepers. A lot of people's keepers this year made things, and I thought made things and made the draft pretty difficult to put together a solid team. I thought last year things kind of went. A lot of things kind of fell my way pretty good, and I put together a solid team that I thought deserved to win the championship. It would go all the way last year, and fortunately, it ended up happening. This year, I tried, put together what I thought was a ragtag group with a scrappy group with potential, and kind of just had to take, you have to take what the draft gives you. I would still much rather have Cooper Kupp than Deontay Johnson, although Deontay Johnson has been definitely carrying his weight lately. But yeah, the draft is you guys make it difficult every year. You got to really, and the competition is the best of any other leagues that I've been involved with. So again, unfortunately, here in the last week of the regular season, said none of you guys, all you guys who are out are out. The guys who are in. Nobody's going to be fighting for a playoff spot here. Normally, this would have been the last week of the regular season, but of course we have this one more week left to go. So this is way too much talking for me this week. Even of course, you probably, as soon as the words come out of my mouth, I'm going to try to keep this one as short as possible. You knew that it was not going to happen. Anyway, so all right, we head into the last week of the regular season. So I think I pretty much summed everything up so far. Man, excuse me. Week 14 is going to be basically a jockeying for position amongst the playoff teams here. And it'll be interesting to watch as we head into the championship, the playoffs here, and as we head towards Tonto Bowl 19. All right, so everyone, thanks for listening or watching or whatever it is you do. May all of your teams and players meet or exceed expectations this week. No big injuries, and we see what happens and who's going to be meeting in Week 15 for Round 1 of the Tonto's Demise playoffs. All right, guys, once again, thank you, and we will see you back here next week to wrap up the events of the regular season and take a little quick peek at what's going to happen Week 1 of the playoffs, which I'm pretty sure I will be involved in. So, all right, guys, thank you again, and we will see you back here next week. Bye-bye.